Courtney Bell sat in the courtroom, her face streaked with tears, hands shaking, voice cracking. She wanted everyone to believe she was the devastated mother, innocent and heartbroken.
It's a sickness, but I tried to be a good mama. I love my baby.
She pointed fingers, told half-truths, and tried to turn the blame onto Chris McNab. But the judge saw through it all. Every tear, every plea, every desperate smile. They didn't fool anyone. Behind the heartbreak, the tension was electric, and the story of what really happened to baby Caliyah was about to explode in court.
But I want my kid back, man. That's my child, man. I want my kid, man.
Courtney Bell was 24 years old and lived in Covington, Georgia. She had a daughter, Clarissa, who was 2 years old, and she was expecting to care for another little baby. Life was not easy for her. She had problems at home and struggles she could not control. She was often scared and unsure. Courtney's life was full of challenges, but she tried to keep going. She met Christopher McNab, a man who would become her boyfriend and later her husband. Their relationship started like many others, but it quickly became complicated. Courtney and Christopher were cousins. Some families thought it was unusual, but for them it seemed normal. However, living together brought new problems. Their house was a small mobile home in Newton County. Space was tight, tensions ran high, and arguments were frequent. Money was short, responsibilities piled up. Raising children was already difficult, and with the constant fights and stress, things at home became chaotic fast. Courtney and Christopher's relationship was marked by fights and bad decisions. They both used drugs, including methamphetamine. These drugs made them act differently, sometimes aggressive, sometimes unpredictable.
But that don't make me a bad mama. I make sure my baby's grown.
Courtney said Christopher beat her often. She lived in fear of his temper, afraid to speak or act freely. Arguments were loud. Sometimes they would scare their neighbors. There were times when Courtney felt trapped, unsure how to get away. She loved her children, but the environment around her was dangerous. In October 2017, Courtney's second daughter, Caliyah, was born. She was just 2 weeks old when tragedy struck. At first, everything seemed normal. The tension between Courtney and Christopher made the home an unsafe place for a newborn. Arguments escalated. Drugs made thinking clearly almost impossible. Courtney had to care for a tiny baby, while also dealing with fear, stress, and abuse. Her life was spinning out of control, and she had little support. She had to juggle being a mother, being a victim of abuse, and living in a dangerous household. On the morning of October 7th, 2017, something terrible happened. Courtney woke up around 5 a.m. She had been up most of the night with the baby. She noticed that Caliyah was missing from her sleeper. Panic set in immediately. She could not find her tiny daughter anywhere. She checked all the usual places. She looked under the bed, in clothes, in bags. She called out, hoping the baby had just rolled somewhere. Courtney's voice was frantic when she called 911. She told the operator, "My 2-year-old said she's gone. I looked everywhere in the house. I don't know another possibility." She explained she had put the baby to bed after feeding and changing her. She had been asleep for only a short time. The operator tried to calm her, but Courtney was desperate. She did not know where Caliyah could be.
She's not in her sleeper. She's not here. I've looked everywhere.
Courtney did not tell Christopher right away that Caliyah was missing. She said that when she finally did, he started acting strangely. He seemed anxious, nervous, and almost like he was panicking. Courtney remembered thinking he was acting crazy, even though she had not yet shared all the details. When the news of the baby's disappearance spread to others, Christopher's behavior grew more erratic. Witnesses who were with the couple described seeing him frantically leave the car after hearing about the baby. He muttered about going somewhere, about getting out quickly, about stopping at a Marathon gas station. Courtney did not ask him if he did anything to the baby. She said she was too scared of his answer. Fear ruled her choices that day. She wanted only to survive, to get him away from her, to find some sense of control. As the 911 call ended, neighbors, friends, and volunteers began looking for the baby. Everyone wanted to help. Courtney's mother, Pamela Hamby, joined the search. An acquaintance, Lauren Mackey, also came to help. People combed the neighborhood. They checked nearby parks, the woods, and even the homes of friends and neighbors. The tension grew with every passing hour. Courtney's fear and panic increased. She described looking through everything at home. Clothes, bags, and even small containers were checked. She was desperate and exhausted. Her cries and frantic energy drew the attention of everyone around her. The community's concern for the tiny baby was immense, but no one could know the terrifying truth that was about to be revealed. On October 8th, volunteers found something no one wanted to see. Baby Caliyah's body was discovered in the woods behind the mobile home. She was wrapped in a blue cloth, hidden under a log in a small hole. The place was not far from the house, yet she had been completely concealed. Panic and shock swept through everyone who saw the scene. The autopsy later confirmed what everyone feared. The baby had died from blunt force trauma to her head. The tiny life had been taken violently. The reality of what had happened was unbearable. The small, fragile baby was gone, and the questions about who did this and why began immediately. When Christopher McNab learned that Caliyah had been found, he did not stay calm. He ran. Witnesses saw him fleeing the scene, running through the rain-soaked streets and woods. His behavior was erratic. At a convenience store, he yelled and shouted about what had happened. He said, "I didn't do it. I didn't do it." His clothes were wet, his hair plastered to his head. He seemed to have been running for hours. The store clerk who saw him called 911. Christopher was eventually taken into custody. His desperate behavior made it clear that something was seriously wrong. Courtney's fear of him had been real, and now the law was involved. Courtney Bell was arrested shortly after Christopher. She was taken into custody at a Home Depot parking lot in Conyers, Georgia, after nearly a 24-hour search. Police questioned her about the baby's disappearance and death. She was held without bond in the Newton County Jail. Courtney faced serious charges, including second-degree murder, cruelty to children, and contributing to the deprivation of a minor.
Count 1, murder in the second degree. Count 2, cruelty to children in the second degree. And count 3, contributing to the deprivation of a minor felony.
Christopher faced multiple charges, including malice murder, aggravated battery, first-degree child cruelty, and concealing the death of another. The police investigation revealed that drugs had been used in the house before the tragedy. Both had used methamphetamine that day. Courtney's world had collapsed. The life she tried to manage, the care of 2 children, a troubled relationship, and a dangerous household had ended in disaster. The tiny baby she loved was dead. The home that should have been safe had become the scene of a nightmare. Courtney Bell sat in a cold, gray cell in Newton County Jail. Her hands were cuffed, and she could not move freely. The world outside felt far away. Everything she had known was gone. The baby she had cared for was dead. Christopher McNab, her boyfriend, and the father of Caliyah, was already behind bars too. The police had taken both of them after a frantic search. Volunteers had found Caliyah's body wrapped in a blue cloth under a log in the woods near their trailer. The discovery haunted the whole town. Courtney remembered the last moments she had spent with Caliyah. She had fed her at 5 in the morning, changed her diaper, and tucked her into clean pajamas. She had checked on her tiny baby, then gone back to sleep on the living room couch. When she woke hours later, Caliyah was gone. Panic had taken over, and she called 911. Every step she had taken since then had led to this cold cell. Courtney always claimed she had nothing to do with the baby's death. She said she had fed Caliyah, checked on her, and gone back to sleep. She insisted she had not seen or heard Christopher strike the baby. Every story she told painted her as a frightened mother, shocked and terrified by what had happened. She acted like an innocent parent caught in a nightmare. Courtney told police she did not know anyone who could have taken Caliyah. She explained that the last time she saw the baby, both she and Christopher had been awake briefly at 5 in the morning. Then, she went back to sleep. She said she had not smoked marijuana in weeks and had not used methamphetamine for years. She tried to convince investigators that the home had been quiet that morning, and no one could have predicted what would happen next.
But they don't bring me a bad mama. They sure my baby grows.
What kind of drugs did you use?
Weed.
Weed and meth. Okay.
But I've been clean for the longest.
Yeah.
And then he cheated on me.
Christopher McNab told a different story. He admitted to arguing and fighting with people in the past, but denied harming Caliyah. Witnesses saw him acting strangely after the baby went missing. At a convenience store, he was drenched and rambling, shouting, "I didn't do it! I didn't do it!" People watched as he ran through rain-soaked streets, desperate and terrified. He claimed he had been in the woods all day, hiding, trying to escape what had happened.
Whatever happened to her, wherever she's at, wherever she was, I didn't have anything to do with it. Nothing else. All I know is that I killed my little girl.
The police noted his erratic behavior. He seemed panicked, yet also defiant. He yelled about being blamed for something he insisted he did not do. Store clerks called 911. The police found him quickly. The trial focused on the evidence from the night of October 6th to the morning of October 7th. Police confirmed both Courtney and Christopher had used methamphetamine the night before. Autopsies showed that Caliyah had blunt force injuries to her head, fractures in her skull, bruising on her face, and lacerations in her mouth. The injuries would have caused death almost immediately. Despite the violent nature of Caliyah's death, there was no evidence tying Courtney directly to the injuries. Medical experts testified that the cause of death was blunt force trauma. Nothing showed she inflicted these injuries or even witnessed them. Investigators could not prove that her drug use had caused her to neglect the baby at the time of the fatal attack. Nothing suggested that Courtney could have predicted Christopher would act violently. The trial was tense and emotional. Witnesses described the chaos in the home and the couple's drug use. Experts explained Caliyah's injuries. Courtroom spectators listened as Courtney's lawyers argued that she had acted as a caring mother within her limits. They said she loved her children and had checked on Caliyah early that morning. They claimed the prosecution had no evidence showing she caused the baby's death or could have prevented it. The Newton County jury initially found Courtney guilty of all 3 charges. She was convicted of second-degree murder, cruelty to children, and contributing to the dependency of a minor. Her world collapsed. She had been judged guilty of the most serious crimes possible for a parent. The community reacted with shock. People struggled to understand how a mother could be responsible for such a horrifying event. Christopher's fate was different. He was found guilty of malice murder and multiple other charges. He was sentenced to life without parole plus 10 years. The courtroom scene when the judge asked him what sentence he would give the real guilty party became viral online. Christopher said the maximum sentence. The judge then delivered it. Courtney's lawyers immediately appealed her convictions. They argued that the prosecution had presented no direct evidence tying her conduct to Caliyah's death. They said the idea that living with Christopher or using drugs caused the baby's death was too far-fetched. They claimed her actions were not the proximate cause of what happened. The Georgia Court of Appeals reviewed the case. They reversed the murder and cruelty to children convictions, agreeing that the evidence was insufficient. However, they left in place the conviction for contributing to the dependency of a minor. The court said her neglect might have played a part in creating dangerous conditions for the baby.
Today, the state Supreme Court overturned that conviction, saying, quote, there was no evidence that Caliyah's death was a reasonably foreseeable consequence of Bell's drug use, or that it was reasonably foreseeable that McNab would commit the horrific crimes that resulted in Caliyah's death.
The Georgia Supreme Court took the case next. They examined whether the evidence was enough to support even the remaining conviction. Justice John J. Ellington wrote the unanimous opinion. The court looked at every detail of the case: when Courtney fed and checked on Caliyah, how she went back to sleep, the violent act committed by Christopher, and the medical evidence of the baby's injuries. The court concluded that there was no way to prove that Caliyah's death was a reasonably foreseeable consequence of Courtney's conduct. They said she could not have predicted Christopher's actions. There was no evidence she participated in the crime, refused medical help, or even knew it was happening. The court reversed the last conviction. Courtney's attorneys had argued strongly that the prosecution's theory was stretched too far. They said the state wanted to punish her simply for living with Christopher and using meth years earlier. They claimed that having a dirty house or a boyfriend who was violent toward adults could not reasonably predict a baby being killed in the middle of the night. The Supreme Court agreed. Investigators continued to study the case even after the arrests. They confirmed the timeline. Courtney fed Caliyah at 5, went back to sleep, and awoke hours later. Volunteers found the baby's body on October 8th. Autopsies confirmed blunt force trauma. No signs showed prior injuries. Toxicology revealed drugs had been used, but none caused Caliyah's death. The police also examined the house. There were no signs of forced entry or external threats. Witnesses confirmed that while Courtney and Christopher used meth, the baby had been checked on and fed. Nothing indicated Courtney had failed in a way that made the violent act foreseeable. The case drew national attention. Headlines described the horror of a 2-week-old baby found beaten and hidden. News outlets covered the arrests, the trial, and the ongoing appeals. People debated whether Courtney had been guilty or wrongly accused. The story circulated widely, with details of Christopher's life sentence, Courtney's arrests, and the Supreme Court reversal. Reporters noted Courtney's calm demeanor during interviews and her insistence that she had tried to protect her children. Stories highlighted the complexity of the case, drug use, prior violence, and the unforeseeable acts of Christopher. It became clear that the legal system had to carefully weigh actions, intentions, and consequences. After the Supreme Court reversed her last conviction, Courtney was finally released from jail. She had been held without bond since her arrest in January 2018. The legal nightmare was over, at least in terms of criminal liability. She walked out of Newton County Jail, free from the charges that had kept her confined for years. Courtney stepped into the light outside, facing the aftermath of the tragedy. The memory of Caliyah's death remained, but the law now recognized that she had not caused it. Christopher McNab, meanwhile, remained in prison, serving life without parole for the brutal killing of their daughter. Justice Ellington summarized the court's reasoning clearly. Courtney had checked on her baby and returned to sleep. The violent act by Christopher was direct and immediate. The state could not show that Courtney's conduct proximately caused Caliyah's death. Her living situation, her past drug use, or her tolerance of Christopher's habits were not enough to make the crime foreseeable. The court ruled that any reasonable jury could not convict her under these facts. The ruling overturned all convictions. Courtney's legal responsibility for Caliyah's death was removed. The court's words emphasized a key point. Criminal liability requires direct connection or reasonably foreseeable results. In this case, Courtney had none of that. The law distinguished between tragic events and criminal acts.